Guys, also, so what we'll do just whilst we're waiting for Rob, follow the same format we did last week. So I've got a couple of topics that I'll cover with Rob that I think, things like previous questions that have been asked, a couple that I've got for him as well. And then what we can do is just jump into Q&A for you guys. I really suggest use his expertise. So, any ideas for any questions on, for example, like running a workshop in your company with your team, use him, ask questions. Oh, we got him back in action. Sorry, my fault. I sent through, I updated the invite and I just let down. It didn't send through the Zoom link.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I thought I was going mad. I was on the Google Hangouts and there was no one there.
No, it's my fault.
No worries. Hello, everybody.
How's things? So, how was your barbecue, by the way?
It was actually good. Yeah, I mean, it was more kind of kid orientated rather than adult, so hence why I was sober. So
early Friday afternoon.
You had a haircut as well.
Yeah, I finally got to the barber's last week. the guy said in German, "It's like you look like a new man." Got a big beard and big hair going on as well. Awesome. Right, it's Friday night, so I don't want to drag everyone, keep everyone here for too long. So just a bit of background, like Rob and I know each other actually quite well now from Berlin. I thought it'd be great to get Rob in as founder of Leap. Rob, I'll get you to sort of do your own intro after. Yeah. As really a sort of design sprint workshop specialist, also a lot of background in design thinking, like design strategy, these kinds of things. So I think, some of the conversations Rob and I have had, did a couple of webinars before, hopefully touch upon some interesting topics that sort of cross the boundary when it comes to design and product. So yeah, I suppose we can kick off. Rob, do you want to give yourself maybe a better intro than I did?
No worries. Thanks, Henry. Yeah. So my background, cheers. I actually haven't even had a chance to grab a beer yet. My background is design, and but kind of more about kind of balancing design with business as well. So ex-senior design manager for Qualcomm for a number of years in the early part of the 2000s, and ended up becoming a freelance design consultant when I relocated. We emigrated to the south of France, so I ended up becoming a design consultant for companies like Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone, to name but a few. And then IBM basically headhunted me to be a creative director for their new studio in Dubai. So we ended up emigrating there for a couple of years as well. So traveled around for the last 10 years specifically. And actually the reason I'm in Berlin is because I used to be a product design director for AJ and Smart. So I don't know if any of you who know AJ and Smart, but basically they run like a 4-day version of the design sprint based on Jake Knapp's book, Q book. And basically was responsible for running sprints for companies like Twitter, Western Digital, AMG, Mercedes, HSBC, you name it, like the big ones. So kind of seen quite a lot of product design and innovation happen for like those companies. And the reason I like mentioning IBM is because they do design thinking. They have their own kind of enterprise version of design thinking nowadays. And it's kind of nice, kind of like just knowing kind of there's a kind of completely contrasting processes of how you can actually get a product to market. So for me, I like the sprint. I think it works really, really well. I don't think it's the answer for everything, but maybe that's because I kind of have some design thinking hacks as well. So that's kind of why I'm here, and obviously why like Henry and I started talking as well, because we both have this kind of mutual interest in design sprints. So yeah, happy to be at your kind of disposal today. So yeah, feel free to ask me questions.
So I think a nice way to do it is, why don't I give you a bit of context on sort of where we're at with the Prod MBA so far. And then we can jump into a few questions that I think came up over the last few days that I think would be relevant. And then, we can branch out as we usually do and sort of touch upon. Again, I think one of the reasons we generally have good conversations, me coming from this very sort of like lean startup product side of things, and you with this sort of design thinking, design sprint, tends to be quite interesting. Excellent. So essentially where we're at is with the Prod MBA, what we're doing with Product Mastery is taking these guys through a 6-week program. So all the way from sort of how do you identify a good opportunity all the way through to actually trying to generate revenue from it, and then what are the next steps if we're looking at scaling it and like building teams around opportunities. So one thing we've done so far is a lightning decision jam yesterday. So I just introduced the concept with a workshop, 1 hour workshop, but maybe we kick off just giving, a better idea of, so firstly, really what the design sprint is, just very briefly for anyone that's not aware of this. I suppose, what is a design sprint in a sentence? What is the value of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the fail fast, fail quickly kind of mantra that everybody kind of harps on about, but probably doesn't really know what that actually really means. But it's a very rapid process that within 4 days, you would know whether or not to kind of pursue in either the creation of this product, or maybe you're seeking investment for a product. Basically, you have a load of assumptions. We all would have assumptions about a new product, for example. You get a team of experts in to kind of execute on what you feel would be the best possible version of that product. And then you make a very quick, high fidelity prototype in 1 day. And that's specifically designed to kind of perform like a real product, even though that it doesn't really kind of function like one. And that's really just where you can then test it with 5 users and actually validate those assumptions that you've all made. And typically, you would then find out from testing with 5 users whether or not it's kind of worth pursuing, or whether you're just in the kind of the right kind of mindset to kind of make this product. There's the Lean Startup is also, I don't know if any of you've read the Lean Startup. There's a lot of parallels with the design sprint and the Lean Startup as well.
They all stem from each other in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Evolution, I suppose that I probably started with Agile Manifesto in 2000, then 2008 you get the Lean Startup, then growth hacking came along 2013.
Yeah.
I mean, sprint, 2000, about the
16.
same time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more recently.
Yeah.
Everything's built upon something that's come before it in a way.
Exactly. But they go on this kind of process of actually just validating it, and then you have an understanding of whether you should. I mean, the sprint was originally made for Google Ventures, so these guys were having to kind of find results within a space of a week, whether or not to invest money into a new product or a new company. So this process kind of works really, really well.
Yeah, and I mean, actually touched upon something I just thought of as well. So Kozawa, I think this is really relevant for you actually, is this idea that, I mean, one of the issues that I've found with the Lean Startup is that it's so focused on measure, learn, test, measure, learn, repeat, etc. that it takes away slightly from the fact that what I like with the design sprint is ultimately like you have to come up with just an idea that, nobody's told you that this is going to be a good idea or bad. You have assumption. And it's just saying, look, we have no idea. Let's test it out quickly and sort of see what happens. So it sort of brings in that slightly design thinking approach, rather than just obsessing over sort of maybe testing, the color of a button. It's more actually trying to go a little bit more high level with feature ideas or product ideas.
Yeah, it's business validation. It's not a usability study. And actually, I posted an article on LinkedIn last week about, why you only need to test with 5 users. And, typically this would be a nice kind of precursor to, I mean, it'd be interesting to kind of know more about you guys actually, and kind of like where you are within your companies. But typically I frame a sprint that it's kind of like the precursor to like the research piece of work. So everybody kind of knows the design thinking system, where you have this discovery learn kind of phase. Almost like a design sprint would kind of be the bit that happens before that. And then once you have all these findings and you have this prototype and you have this data, you can then kind of start kind of putting that into kind of actionable steps within a kind of more of a design kind of process. And that's in its most ideal kind of state.
Yeah. So we've taken then, I mean, just for anyone that's not aware, the Lightning Decision Jam is trying to sort of take some of the principles of the design sprint and squeeze it into an hour. So it's not ideal, right? We're doing something an hour, it usually takes 4 days. But I suppose, Rob, a question now coming on to more sort of how can everyone put this into practice? So specifically in this case, we have product managers, product owners. What do you think is sort of the best first step for putting, some of these principles in place, or is it, trying to jump straight to a design sprint?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends whether you have a specific challenge in mind. Like if you already know kind of like the challenge that you have to solve, and you have an idea that like a digital product is likely to be the outcome of this solution, then yeah, you could rush straight into a sprint. It's designed to get you results like super rapidly. And the other thing as well that's worth mentioning is that you typically, with a lead sprint, same as an AJ and Smart sprint, you only invest 4 days into it. So it's in the grand scheme of things, like for example, in the grand scheme of IBM, for example, making a product where they would make it in like a year or 9 months.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort and a lot of cost down the line to kind of know whether something's going to fail at that point. To know in 4 days whether you're going to fail is much more of a kind of
I think this is one of the core issues. It is, I mean, it's always a question of like ideal versus reality. Is that you and I know that it's the 4 days is going to save just so much back and forth and like misalignment, simple things like they say when it gets down to like coming to wireframes or final UI, just all these little meetings and niggles, these small little things.
Yeah.
So you end up wasting far more than the 4 days. But how have you seen, or how have you sort of pitched this to people to fight? Obviously they're going to go, I imagine the conversation goes, CEO goes, well, I can't drag all these high level people into a room for 4 days. How do you sort of navigate that with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're already onto the right steps by kind of introducing the LDJ, Lightning Decision Jam, because and you're right, it's not going to be the full sprint within like 1 hour. I mean, you can, again, depending on the complexities of your challenges and the alignment that you need to achieve with those core stakeholders. I mean, you could stretch the LDJ out to be a little bit more like a half-day workshop if the challenges were that significant. But I think the really important thing with the LDJ is that you get used to this kind of note and vote system. You get used to this, typically with stakeholders, there's a lot of egos there as well. And it's a very egalitarian kind of way of kind of listening to everybody, but also empowering everybody to have a voice as well. So I would say like the note and vote is the kind of most significant component of a sprint that you would experience. But actually just have like pulling these people together, and you could even frame it as like a problem framing workshop, for example, especially with stakeholders. An hour is a really good use of their time to get alignment and to kind of have this understanding of like how you maybe prioritize certain challenges. And it can also be a little bit of fun as well. So, this is definitely something you guys can do internally within your work systems. And I mean, yes, you are going to have to persuade these guys to be here, but I think the results of just saying, okay, look, we just want to do a workshop for 1 hour. This is a great way of kind of, having like an equal voice, putting everything on the table, and then understanding exactly kind of like a direction to kind of move forward. And just to put that into context, in a sprint, like companies like Twitter, for example, would say by 3 hours into a sprint on a Monday morning, would just say, it would take us months to get this much alignment. How is this even being possible within 3 hours? And this is kind of the component that you can bring into the LDJ, because you have so much exposure to kind of everybody kind of writing down their thoughts, everybody writing down their biggest concerns, biggest fears, like however you want to frame the actual topic of that workshop. It's just a really good system for people to just have some fun and kind of get everything out on the table at the same time. And the other really cool thing about the LDJ is that you assign like a key responsible. So maybe if as a facilitator, the outcome of the actual LDJ would be that you would have actionable steps within, say, like a 2-week kind of period. And I'll give a little example here. So, for example, when I was working at AJ and Smart, we were a very small office, and we were already kind of expanding to like 10 or 11 people. And the space that we were using was like really, really small. And we had people on sales calls. We had the CEO who's a loud Irish guy. He admits that himself. And, we had kind of prototypers who were trying to do work. And it was just almost impossible because all these kind of people, all these egos were in like one space. Yeah. And it was just becoming really, really difficult. So we ran an LDJ as our retro, and we framed it as, okay, like size and noise is a kind of like a big deal. How can we solve for this? And within the hour, we had tons of ideas, like ranging from like, oh, we could like buy a really kooky, like, you know, UK phone box or something and have it in the corner and make that like a quiet standing desk so that people can do sales and they don't have to worry about upsetting the prototypers. We had really cool things like, why don't the salespeople just work from home? Why don't we just get another office space? But a thing that bubbled up a couple of times was, why don't we just buy everybody noise cancelling headphones? And that got a lot of votes. So with the LDJ, what you can do is like the things that get the most votes, these are the things you can action to just try really, really quickly. So within a 2-week period of time, somebody owned that. So I think it was Kyle, who was like the office guy. He goes, right, okay, I'll own this. I'll just go to Amazon, buy like 5 sets of like really nice, cool Bose headphones, these ones here, and we'll try them out and see if it actually works. So they ordered, they came like within 2 days. Tim and I were already kind of wearing the headphones because we were prototyping at the time where we needed some space. And we gave feedback after a couple of weeks and basically explained that actually this is a really good way to kind of work. And what also happened was that it kind of meant that because we were working in such an open office, when people were basically wearing their headphones, it meant that they were in like their deep work. They didn't want to have conversations. So, you know, you wouldn't come in and go, oh, who wants a coffee? You know, and then disrupt everybody. Because they were noise cancelling, it just meant that, yeah, I'm kind of concentrating on my thing. If my headphones are off, then I'll be kind of like open to kind of conversations and whatnot. Yeah. So yeah, after 2 weeks, everybody had noise cancelling headphones, and, you know, it was a much cooler way of kind of operating that small space. Yeah. Also, the other post-it that got a lot of notes was we need a bigger office. And just coincidentally, the next day, one of the other co-founders happened to be just going in to work at the weekend, and the neighbor came out and he goes, oh, I'm thinking of selling my office space. And basically Michael just went, yep, don't advertise it, we'll just take it off your hands immediately. Yeah. So by serendipity, you know, kind of like things kind of worked out really, really well. Yeah. But I mean, the kind of the end game of the story is basically you can run an LDJ, have really good ideas presented to you, have everybody kind of then have this tangible kind of understanding of what the common goals are, agree and then vote on which ones you want to sort out. And then within a 2-week period of time, you can have some actionable steps as a way of measuring whether that can be solved or not. Yeah, so that's the good precursor.
The beauty of it, that I mean, it didn't come across so well yesterday because obviously we're not, you know, a team that's working. So we just did a retro with, you know, the 5 participants from the alumni.
Yeah,
I think it's not quite the same when, you know, using 2 examples, right? As you said, when you have an internal team, it's that very rapid alignment. Or it's things like, say, as Michael, one of your co-founders, because he knows he's already taken the temperature of the room.
Yeah.
In terms of what are the challenges people think are important, what are the solutions that could work. So he can actually have autonomy in even making the decision. I mean, obviously he's the founder, but even if someone were lower down, they could make that decision knowing that this is what broadly the team thinks and this is what we think is important. Yeah. It's really, really powerful. And I think on that topic of alignment as well, like I did I've got working with a client and did an LDJ just with their like senior management, so like all C-levels. And yeah, just that realization of like aligning all of them around one challenge, some prioritized solutions. Again, you know, that moment of like, wow, that's, you know, that was so powerful in an hour. Yeah. As you said, even with a small startup, these are 20-person startup. It saved them months, and it was fun as well. Like you see people sort of like really getting involved with it. Obviously, as the facilitator, you're trying to sort of keep the energy up, etc. But yeah, it's just so you know, I'm becoming a massive evangelist, but you can just use it in so many contexts, right?
Yeah, and actually, I would say the best way for you guys to sell it internally is to just not sell it as like an LDJ or a problem framing exercise. Just when you're kind of presenting it to the stakeholders or like the senior product team, just say like, okay, who's fed up of having a meeting and the outcome is more meetings that don't ever go anywhere? Like, and everybody will just go, oh yeah, God, I'm sick of that. Have actually something that you can action it afterwards. That's probably one of the best ways. And whenever we were doing like, innovation workshops, that's how we would frame it.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even need to use these clever words. It's just like, okay, we need to sort of align ourselves around something in an hour.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, the beauty of it is just by doing, people immediately get it and they can see like where this could be applied in different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, it's interesting as well because it's, you know, we talked about this, I think, in the last webinar a couple of weeks ago around that topic of like, where does change come from? So many companies, they're stuck in this very waterfall driven culture, essentially, where they may say they are agile, but ultimately it's a waterfall culture, right? Where it's just focused on like, let's get X amount of features done as quickly as possible, rather than sort of more autonomous, outcome orientated team.
Yeah.
I suppose that's, a topic that there's not a clear answer to, because it depends. But, is it that you can bring about change, sort of move towards being more product led by starting with sort of these small workshops? Or is it ultimately the more sort of growth hacking approach where you're trying to sort of form a small cross-functional team, get them to just start delivering results, and then say, turn to management and say, hey, look at this. Like in 2 weeks, we came up with, we delivered results already. Yeah. I suppose either the sort of design sprint LDJ approach or the growth hacking approach work. I think it probably just depends on the context, and also ultimately, like, who is the change enabler, the change maker there.
Yeah,
they have the skill sets not only to know the theory, like you can read the Lean Startup, you can read Hack and Growth, you can understand conceptually like how you should be structuring experiments, structuring your team, etc. But ultimately, if you can't put those ideas into practice, then change isn't going to happen. I think my conclusion, looping back to the beginning, is that the LDJ is just that such a nice Trojan horse. It's such a small thing. It sort of starts this cultural chain. It can be really, really powerful.
But make sure that you have somebody as a responsible who's going to action those results. And that's why it's normally broken down into like 3 or 5 is a long version, but 3 steps to action something is normally the best thing to do. And that just helps give people kind of start points so that it can go away and actually initiate that. But like if you say you check in a couple of weeks time, or you don't check in a couple of weeks time, then it just becomes like another meeting where people have just, there isn't really anything tangible that you kind of action. That's the whole point, that you actually do that.
I mean, on that, just out of interest, have you ever felt that, have you seen, say, people sort of workshopping for the sake of workshopping at times?
Yeah, IBM.
What?
IBM.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fun. Yeah. It's fun, and it feels like you're getting. I mean, generally, you are getting stuff done.
Yeah, actually, I encountered this recently on a workshop that I participated in, and in the end, I ended up kind of taking over and actually doing the actionable steps at the very end of it. And I was kind of texting the facilitator at the same time, so they knew kind of what I didn't just kind of like barge right in, but I just said, look, these guys. They are feeling like there's not really anything like tangible that's coming out of this. How about we do this, this, and this? Yeah. And they just said, yeah, look, if you want to just offer that up and kind of, we can then manage it from there. That's perfect. But that was a really good example of that. The intent was really good. The mirror board was really nice. And, but there just wasn't really kind of like a conclusion to that workshop, which is a bit of a shame, but we recovered it. It's totally fine.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to come up with just a few quick fire sort of very tactical questions on the design sprint and LDJ.
Yeah.
And then we can open up for questions. Has anyone got a question, by the way, before? Just prepared if you want. Might not. Anything about sort of workshops in your team? Anyway, think about it. I'll come back after these. So yeah, a couple of questions that came up yesterday based on our LDJ. First one is, when do you know when to bring in? So when do you need a decider ultimately?
You should have a decider on every workshop, ideally, because otherwise, this is kind of where you invoke like just endless discussion, and you don't need to have endless discussion. But I would say typically on a sprint, it's just, this is what enables you to have the momentum. And it's not about being right and being right then. It's about just someone going, okay, yeah, we know this is a bigger topic, but for now, let's just agree to go this route, and then we can kind of move on.
Would you say that it maybe varies in terms of organization size? Because I know, for example, when we did the strategy sprint for Leap, and when we did the retro yesterday, I felt it sort of worked quite well, giving equal votes or maybe sort of one more. Whereas, for example, if you're obviously bringing in say you have your product team and you're bringing in, say, 2 C-levels, to that sprint, then clearly they have such a higher level of sort of business and strategy knowledge.
Yeah. Typically, the rule of thumb is it's the most senior person in that room that will be the decider.
Would you then recommend giving one so the vote that they place decides everything, or would you say give them 2 more votes than everyone else?
It actually depends what the exercise is, because for example, say you're just doing a how might we's, or everybody's framed like how might we's, and everybody's contributed like 5 each,
Yeah.
and maybe there's like 8 of you in a room. That's a very similar scenario to a sprint as well. You can give everybody like 5 votes for that. That's probably more than enough. You want to be able to kind of have enough heat so that people can kind of really kind of see like where the heat's forming. But I would say in that respect, have the decider always go last, because if they go first, they kind of influence the votes as well, because people tend to go, oh, like he's the most senior person, I'm just going to get some brownie points and just copy him. So have the decider go last. And in that respect, you would just give them like double the votes. So you could give them like easily like 10, but that would be a lot. I would say, I mean, but you're looking at maybe like 6 to 80 kind of post-its. So it's not that bad. And then obviously once you've created the heat, at this point, this is a collaboration exercise as well. So they're not going to just veto something and just put it to the top.
Yeah,
whereas some of the other exercises are. So for example, like if you were coming up with the can we questions, you need 3 can we questions, and this is normally the responsibility of the decider as well, but where, like Henry, you were saying, they have a broader kind of product understanding. You would give them 3 dots, as well as their heat from earlier on, and then they would just be able to kind of like veto certain kind of clusters. Or it might be that, you know, the room hasn't really seen something with the vision that they have, and they would say, actually, this is significantly part of my of our roadmap, but you guys would have the exposure to it, so they would be able to put a green dot on it and then elevate that up as a top.
I suppose it's good. It just simply them having that sort of heat map, and also needing to justify as well in a way why they're just stepping in and saying, you know, we're doing this.
Yeah, the heat ultimately is really just to include everybody. I've had many deciders either go with the heat because it depends on their leadership skills or their direction or their knowledge of the product. But quite often it's like you've brought these people into this room for a reason. You're giving them heat because you want to make them feel like they're included. So if you're creating something like a vision topic, or you know that you're trying to determine what the challenge is, it could be that you bring people in from IT, you bring people in from marketing, you bring people in from the dev team, from designers, from whatever. All you're doing is you're just saying, look, this is what we're doing. I really value your say and your input, so you can contribute to the ideas and contribute to the way that we solve it. But then ultimately, the person who's responsible for that product is going to be going, yeah, okay, great. That's actually a really amazing perspective that I've just gained by having all of you guys included. But we're going to go this route. But I kind of thank you for your contribution. All that's kind of done without words. So
it's what's so powerful. I mean, it reminds me that there's that Jeff Bezos quote on I can't remember what it is about, you know, disagreeing but then committing.
Yeah, disagree and commit. Exactly. That's exactly the reason why you should never have 2 deciders as well.
Yeah. But I mean, that's powerful, isn't it? Just simply, you know, somebody. I was thinking, you know, more like, say, a UI designer that's generally a little bit out of the loop in decision making.
Yeah.
Just letting them feel like they're having a voice, and they genuinely are having a voice. You know, just gives, it really motivates people. So even if your idea is not selected, at least you say, well, look, I'm happy to go with the team, rather than thinking, you know, my boss is being a bit of a prick and just saying, we're doing this, whatever, I'm not going to listen to anything else.
Yeah. And it depends what the psychology of the workshop is as well, like whether it's for product or whether it's for alignment. There's a win-win from both of those scenarios. Like I've run sprints where it's purely because there's been a really senior person who's coming in to run like the UX team, or like a head of UX or head of product. And he basically wants to go, okay, this is now the way we're doing things. He would have selected kind of really carefully senior people who are kind of owners of the product in many different kind of factors, and it's basically his way of going, right, I'm here now, like this is the direction that I'm going to go, but I really kind of value your contribution. But it's also for them to kind of see how he or she would also make those decisions as well. I'm trying not to say he, actually, because that was a real actual client scenario, but it was really cool. And again, this is one of those things that if you're facilitating, and you know, you should have some kind of parameters kind of at the back of your mind as to kind of why you're running this workshop. And then, you know, it could even be that you're working very closely with the decider, So you would have these conversations up front, so you would know kind of what to get out of those workshops. I mean,
sorry, on that, because I think that's the most actually really relevant point for these guys is, as let's say mid-level product managers and product owners, where would you see, you know, the design sprint, this sort of workshop format being, you know, the most powerful? Like, where is it most potent for that kind of scenario?
I mean, I think it depends, but I think it just, if I understand your question correctly, it's just about having this alignment to kind of move forward with something, and that's all it is.
Just that's talking about alignment from, you know, people above you and below you.
Yeah, it's like there's always a as I read recently, Henry, there's you know, like stakeholders have their idea of what their vision is, and then, you know, the people that are responsible for the product have a different meaning. It's purely a way of actually getting that alignment as well. So, and it's you're literally just putting your cards on the table and seeing what everybody's got, and then you can understand exactly like the right way to kind of move forward. And I think a lot of politics internally with these companies are when, you know, people they don't act as transparent as you would want them to. So you're kind of playing a guessing game as well. So run an LD day and it covers that up.
It's probably miscommunication rather than communication. Yeah. It's like people in misinterpreting things.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even more so, obviously, when we're remote as well, because you're not picking up on sort of small in-person signals. Awesome. Sorry, I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask some questions. So we've covered Decider. Couple more questions. This was one from Richard yesterday. Why do we create the positive idea? I think we covered it in the community, but I'd like to hear your input on this. So we, you know, when we create our positive ideas, right? What are the things pushing the ship forward?
Yeah.
But we sort of leave them thereafter. Firstly, what is the logic of that, to be clear? And secondly, are there scenarios where actually, you know, you can use these?
Okay, so with my experience at the sailboat, the only reason you're doing positives is to kind of, that's almost like your icebreaker or your warm up. It's way easier for people to write down the positive things that are happening to them or their lives. It could be, for example, like say you frame the LDJ as like, you know, what's wrong with our work environment. It's way easier to go, all right, okay, what's right with it first? You know, it gives people this kind of, you're lowering the barrier for people to write with their Sharpies on like Post-it notes. And you're kind of like, it's just, as a human nature, it's easier to write the positives down.
Yeah.
You don't really act on them because they're typically things that are working already. And you want to focus on the negative things. So it's just a precursor for them to be able to kind of like be a bit more honest when they're writing those negative things down. That's all it's for.
I mean, that is interesting, because I was thinking about this question when I answered Rich. You know, I gave more or less that answer, but there, you know, particularly in product cases, I'd say, particularly with early stage products, like you really want to be doubling down on the good things in a way.
But I would say
you don't need a sprint to solve that, do you? You would
if they're good things, they're already working. So why would you need to kind of focus on them?
I also think you would just iterate, you know, based off seeing the results of that directly, rather than go, you know, we need a sprint to work out how to, you know, it's sort of a
And like in a sprint scenario, like if you were kind of, so basically we run iteration sprints. So at the end of the week, we collect data and then we iterate on it to really kind of work on that data and basically put our money where our mouth is. So the first part of the iteration sprint is that you would do a sailboat and you would work out, okay, what worked out really well from the prototype last week and what resonated with those users, and people would then write them down. And then you would then say, okay, what didn't work so well? So this is where you kill features that maybe kind of people had high hopes for. But then typically that's where you might, on a certain scenario, you might turn around and just say, actually this feature worked really well, but then the but would be in the negative. So then that would be
comes out in the solution, right? If you're saying, you know, this feature was a waste of time, and then when you come to solution, hey, why don't we actually double down on that good idea we had earlier?
Yeah. I mean, but I
think about that thought exercise after. I was like, why is that the case?
Yeah, I think just because it would always, I don't think I've ever had a workshop where we would vote on something that's already working, because it's already working and it's already in there.
Yeah. I also, there's less need for sort of alignment and things.
Yeah.
I'm sort of aware of it, I suppose. Awesome. Let's open up then for any questions from anyone listening. Does anyone want to jump in? Just put your hand up. If not, I'm happy to have a chat with Rob for another 20 minutes. Kai.
We've got one, yay.
Yes, of course. Maybe this is a little bit far-fetched or goes beyond our current topic, but are you familiar with an approach called liberating structures? And how would you, if so, how would you link it to this lightning decision jam?
I have not heard of liberating structures. I'm sorry. So I would not give you a bullshit answer.
I mean, Kai, sorry, give us just an overview of what that is. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
They are various, they are a combination of various tools for facilitating cooperation in the same way as we had with the this decision jam. They're all supposed to be time boxed, and they also approach a very egalitarian way. Like, for instance, one method is 1, 2 for all, which means I assign a question into the group and everybody writes down for his personal point of view. Then you go with pairs, couples. The couples start to build hubs and make conversation there. Then you have 4 people combining their written down, and then you go public, which has the nice side effect that especially the male dominant effect we all know about in groups is being reduced because everybody with the 1, 2 for all escalation is able to participate. They are very popular, or sort of popular, in the startup scene in Berlin, being
because there's an issue with ultimately you have, I mean, we're talking about this 10 guys on the call, but usually we have actually relatively good mix for technology. But there is an issue in tech team. This is actually something that's important to be aware of for everyone, that if basically you have some minority groups and they don't have an ally within the team, say for example you're the only woman in a 10-person tech team, then generally they're going to start feeling isolated or not able to voice their opinion, which is bad for them, but ultimately it's bad for the team as well, because you're not getting good input and diverse opinions on these things. So it's not about sort of political correctness. It's
Henry, hi. It's Raf here. Hi. So Nilesh and I have both done liberating structures, so we can have a chat maybe offline and then maybe bring some of that in.
Yeah, it's something I was thinking about actually. It could be a cool way of building up to the squads we have, for example, in the future.
Yeah.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, and as Kai was saying, some really good techniques. It's not just one thing; it's a whole range of things. And I think Nilesh is on the call. He used it at River Island at one of his clients, and so it's a really good way of getting teams to talk, to get information out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really like the idea of that. I think it sounds really cool.
They are very useful tools. I think we did a couple of sessions with Tobias Mayer with his Scrum Exchange stuff. There's some of them are very powerful, but most of them try and deal with the complexity of information bubbling up and being able to be exposed. So a lot of the structures around facilitation and structuring groups in such a way that information can flow out from everyone. But very powerful. I mean, there's many techniques. I think large groups use things like fishbowl. They're very good. So happy to help.
It sounds really cool. I think message me on Slack and we could do maybe a 30-minute session from one of you guys.
Yeah, what it would be good is, the exercise we did yesterday, we could do that as a 1, 2 for all, and you'd see the difference and how it works.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you still time box though, because I mean that's the thing, when you have free discussion, things tend to kind of, or do you just plan like a longer workshop time with regards to that?
It's more time boxed actually. So you have time box within time boxes. You tend to have even more time boxes that you're sort of helping to propagate, that each time box split stop point is effectively reconsolidating information and then moving into a new time box of new information.
Yeah, cool. No, I kind of like I was taking notes down as it was being mentioned. I've
already got the link up.
It's quite powerful because it builds that consensus in the room. You sort of, I
think there's a free iOS app if you guys are interested, which has all of them listed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because it's interesting as well with, it's why I like actually the remote sprint in a way, because if you're facilitating well, then you're anonymizing the ideas from people, right? And that, I think that's powerful when people are Yesterday's probably not a good example because we're doing a retro sort of on the Prod MBA. So obviously, if people are aware that I'm facilitating, I personally don't take offense to any feedback. I'm very open to it. But obviously, you're going to tone down slightly some of the things you're saying if you're aware there's some observation. Which again, actually, though, sorry, and I think linked to that, the liberated structure is really nice. I imagine because you're sort of anonymizing as well there. It's a super interesting point actually.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's the one interesting thing I found, like the one Kai mentioned, like 1, 2, 4 all. It sounds very simplistic, but your ideas are getting tested and reinforced as well as. So what you tend to get by the time you get to all, you're hoping to have the strongest ideas being the ones you've discussed.
Yeah.
Once they've gone through those stages of being tested basically with other people.
It's really interesting as well, though. This is a sort of a core problem with product management in general, I think, is that because generally in our day-to-day roles, like we have demands placed on us where we're constantly dealing with like complexity of sort of predefined features, a list of tasks lands on our table. We forget that actually fundamentally good product management and good product leadership is taking quite simple frameworks and just being able to like take a pause and say, right, guys, we're going to actually just think about like why we are doing this. Sprint is a good example of that. Or simply, having a single conversation with a customer can save, 3 months of work at times, coming up with a good idea, etc. So I think all of these frameworks are incredibly powerful. And that's why also I wanted to really push the LDJ and the sort of sprint process as well. It's really just a playbook that you can use. I was calling it a secret weapon. Anyone in product can use that, and any issue in terms of like aligning stakeholders, like navigating difficult managers, etc., aligning your team as well. All of these things are very quickly solved if we come in with this simple 1 hour framework.
Can I ask a question to the group? Like, have any of you guys run sprints or like design sprints?
Yeah, I have. I think Rafa, you have as well.
Yeah,
right?
I have as well. Yeah,
Design.
I've done them for about 5 years now. Yeah.
Good.
Oh, wow.
And is that kind of encompassing the kind of the prototyping and the user testing within the same week?
Yeah, so I was at McKinsey, so we
Cool.
run a McKinsey process, which was very much like a design sprint.
Yeah, I've run a McKinsey concept sprint for McKinsey.
Yeah, brilliant. In Berlin.
They stole the idea of your ventures, didn't they?
They steal every idea. Yeah.
I think all the consultancies do that, right? I've got versions of everything as well.
Of course.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that upselling is quite strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I ran it, it was quite challenging to get to the prototyping stage. I think the business usually, when I deal with certain stakeholders, they buy into it initially.
Yeah.
But the expectations are usually quite different, so they're happy if agreements happen on paper. They're not always willing to let it continue to get to prototyping.
Yeah, that was a really good topic Rob and I talked about is, ultimately that I think the design sprint process is very powerful, but it's not going to, magically build the product for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, that my conclusion with it is that ultimately it's a great way to kick off things and align or realign. But, to actually deliver the results, fundamentally, you need an effective product process. And this is what we'll cover in week 6. So you have to be outcome orientated, not only with this prototype and testing it in a lab, day 3, 4 of the design sprint, but ultimately every feature you're doing needs to have some sort of economic value on it. It's like, how is this impacting, activation of customer retention, ultimately revenue as well? How are we tying that?
This is such a great topic as well, because this is a conversation I have typically with every sprint decider, because when it comes to the storyboarding phase, and naturally my background is design, so prototyping for a day is not a problem. But like typically what happens is that, there's so many features that are kind of discredited during a sprint because one direction is chosen.
Yeah.
And quite often, a lot of the conversations I end up having at the end of it, sorry, my light is really bad actually at this. I need to get a light you've got. But quite often what happens is that, there'll be features where someone will go, it would be really good maybe to kind of like, just like see if there's a subscription model that people would be willing to pay money for example. And actually, what I often say is that, like, let's get to the end of the storyboard, and if there's other kind of like little nuggets that we can put in that you can kind of really like test to see whether that's something that would be of interest to those people, you don't actually have to make the feature to test it. You can just hint at what that feature is likely to be by just creating a button or something, or a little bit of intro copy. And it's a really nice way of actually going, like, for example, like say it's going to be a subscription and it's going to be like $12.99 a month. Most people just go, oh yeah, I like the idea of a subscription, but I wouldn't pay more than €6. You've already got answers as to whether that's a direction that you should go down. So with regards to the prototype, it's good for you guys if you're like product owners within your network to kind of utilize maybe like the design team within your company, if that's even possible, to kind of make those prototypes. And this is a question I've always had for Jake. And, when I actually got to meet him for the first time, like our prototypes were getting ridiculous. Like Tim and I at AJ, like some of our prototypes in one day would be 40 screens for like an iPad.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it got to the point where like we were not doing long days. We were just really highly efficient at what we made, and we had a good kind of process for it.
Which, if you have your UI kit set up, your design system, it's just
so we would always have kind of like really good foundations to start. Don't get me wrong, that's still a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, and I just said to Jake, like, how do you kind of make sure that you don't get all these endless features being kind of crammed into this prototype? Because equally as well, you can cram all the features in the world into a prototype, but you've only got like 45 minutes to an hour to test it as well. Yeah. And he would just say, just like it gets to the end of the day at 6 o'clock. If there's time to put it in. If not, then just cut it, because it can save like for the next version. So
I love the time constraint principle is so powerful as well, because with everything, is if you time box stuff, it makes you get it done.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at what decisions can be made when you're kind of forcing the time on people.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really good.
So Rob, I had a question on that actually. So when you say you lean out some of these, experiments, or they get leaned out, is that is it pre-funnel or post-funnel? So have these things been assessed and stuff before they get leaned out, or are you experimenting before they get into the funnel?
It depends what the objective of the sprint is and where that product is likely to appear. So it could happen for both. So that's typically on a sprint, we would tend to not focus what we would say upstream, because we normally have an idea of what that product is already. We don't need to kind of worry about like how people are funneled into that product. But what we would do is, when it comes to storyboarding, we would kind of bring some of our own expertise in to kind of like say, okay, well, how would this person in this most natural way kind of discover this product? And then we would come up with natural funnels for like the context of that product. We would call these primers, just so that when you have those users actually in the test environment, they're almost discovering the product as naturally as possible. But it could also be that you're maybe running a marketing sprint and you're like almost pre-upstream. You are actually determining what those funnels are. Then it's a different ballgame, because then you're also kind of working what the priority for those funnels is in the sprint, and that would be the outcome as well. There's never like a one rule fits all.
Right, yeah, because that's interesting. Because one question you asked around design sprints, I think with like some organizations that use SAFe, I've noticed that the PI planning phase is used mostly as the design thing, and it's not quite the same as a design sprint. And what it means is that things aren't as visible, because the whole purpose of design sprint is trying to get your customer as close as possible to teams that are building it, so that we can test the assumptions and the hypotheses as best as possible, right? But with the SAFe stuff, there's much more distancing between the two areas.
Yeah.
And so you don't get visibility of testing ideas. You just get a list of features that effectively are candidates that you might want to build.
Yeah, but you can still have an understanding about whether they're going to be viable features, or you can even determine a priority of like the urgency of those features for the product. And that would also help you establish like a backlog, for example. That's what happened with N26.
Yeah.
Rob, me asking a question. I found on some design sprints where like maybe there's been a problem put forward and then there's the right people in the room, but then one person, especially in bigger organizations, one person will keep on adding context, which can be quite demotivating, like, oh, great idea, but we already tried that once, or, you'll never get funding for that, and seen a lot of people switch off. And how do you you probably, by your smile, you've seen this before, but how do you stop that from happening? And how do you, because someone might be right, yet that would cost 4 million, so we couldn't do that. And I've seen where at the end of day one, people have sort of been sat there going, well, let's just wait until he tells us what to do next.
So you can literally kill a lot of this by having a lot of precursory discussions with the decider, the person who's responsible for the sprint. It might even be that they include a specific person, we would call them like a reluctant, to be included in the sprint, so that they can add those kind of concerns and you're right, actually some of them are really valid as well. And this is kind of why they would be included. But the general conversation that I would have, and for me, this is kind of like a luxury position, because I am external, which means I'm impartial. I don't have a problem being really honest with those people and actually saying, it doesn't matter at this point in time. We're just testing this. We need to get answers to know whether this is going to be right. Mm-hmm. So valid point, get it written down on a post-it, and we can address it, and it can be factored in. This is typically in the morning part on a Monday. And this is where you can really kind of get people to contribute and add their concerns. And it can also be, it's such a psychological kind of political kind of movement with regards to Q1 of a sprint, which is where you determine all the back end stuff, as in like, the actual challenges that you're solving, the kind of the roadmap. For example, you always get someone when you come to doing the map, it's like, if you've got multiple team kind of responsibles in there, they'll always go, well, this doesn't align to my roadmap. Like, this is useless. Like, what's going on? And the whole emphasis of a sprint is that you're just kind of putting your stake in the ground, like here and now, and going, right, this is an assumption that we want to test, we want to validate it. This is kind of what we think is the right direction. And you almost want the sprint to kind of open up those conversations with those people that do have concerns. You just need to be really damn good at giving them answers to contain it, so that they don't kind of derail the sprint. But I remember one of my first sprints, I can't remember who it was. It was like an energy provider or something, I can't remember. And the problem was I wasn't running that sprint, but I was kind of participating. And actually we'd onboarded like 5 or 6 of the client, maybe even 7, but there were 3 engineers as part of their team. And like, when you got the engineers together, they were like completely trying to break the process. Like, they're almost kind of like putting doubt into the other people's minds. Like, oh, like, why are we doing this at this point? This is useless. Like, we should be doing this. This isn't relevant, blah, 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 blah. The best thing you can say at this point is, again, this is another conversation I had with Jake, and he just said, just blame him. Just say, trust the process. Like, the process is designed to literally suck you in one end and spit you out the other with the most data possible. And the minute you start deviating and kind of listening to these people, like, oh my, you can listen to them, but the minute you start really focusing on them, that's when you can kind of really have a problem with like the end result of a sprint. So I would just say, listen, give them that voice. You have like the time timer, give them the time that they would have. And that makes them also feel that they have contributed as well. Quite often in trainings, I would just say, okay, that's a really interesting point. Even if it wasn't, just write it down, put it in like the car park or the parking lot, and then we'll address it later. A lot of the time, these people, the reluctants, they just want to feel like they're disrupting momentarily and having their outburst. But as long as they've been listened to, that's kind of mostly the psychology that enables you to kind of move forward. Just enable them to have their window of like having a communication, having a conversation, and then just move on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cheers.
No worries.
Awesome.
Good question, though. Really good question.
Any other questions? Kai, go for it.
If I may.
That's a good concept to work on.
Rob, one question based on your experiences. We all have always expectations and anticipations when we start a process which may lead to something. What was the most surprising outcome in a sprint, in a design sprint or a decision that you would have never expected?
Okay, interesting one. I actually have so many good ones, and I don't know whether I'm just fortunate that we worked with some really good clients, but one of them was an e-gaming sprint, and we were called in as externals to basically disprove the product because it bubbled up through an internal incubator system, and the company just felt like it was so far-fetched they didn't want to build it. But they didn't want to run internal sprints because they didn't want to be kind of like responsible for like saying no, or like they just felt a little bit out of their depth. So we were called in to be completely impartial. And at one point I was even told, like, if it's shit, tell them it's shit, because like we respect your decision on like this product and how it's going to move forward. And like this e-gaming product, we ran the first week sprint and it was like, actually shit, like this is going to make a lot of money. Like if they do this, like this could be really, really big. And this was a sprint from, I think it was mid 2018. And they only decided to can the project about 4 months ago. So they like heavily invested into kind of like these celebrities that were going to be like building communities. But the money that was actually like calculated off the back of this first prototype was insane. Don't get me wrong, there was a very complex roadmap that was initiated afterwards to kind of put all that stuff in play. But it was a topic that we even felt like actually we were kind of really dismissive of this, and it was something that we felt had no legs to kind of move forward. And actually the more we kind of delved into it, it was like, yeah, why would you not do this? So yeah, they actually like heavily invested into that product for quite a few, well, for nearly 2 years, I would say. So yeah, and I think just maybe with the state of the economy like it's going now, that's probably why they canned it, but who knows. But yeah, interesting. Like sometimes you can be really surprised, like, and like completely skeptical. And then just I've also had another sprint where it was a startup from Silicon Valley, and basically my product team had really great ideas of like how to kind of move this project forward. And it was a sole founder whose idea it was, and the problem was that he was so fixed on this product that was for kids, financial product for kids. He kind of like completely ignored like all the advice and all the product advice that we were trying to give him. And in the end, we ended up just saying to him that, like, you know, you've got all these ideas here, you've got the results, you've got the data of how to move forward, but you're kind of just not listening. Like, there's no point of really doing a sprint because you're just building your own thing anyway. You're not kind of listening to the kind of data that you're getting back to kind of build a successful product. And in order to kind of answer this question, I would just say that you need to set expectations up front, and also understand what your clients' expectations are as well, in order to deliver something that means, or that is meaningful for them and tangible for them. So that would be the kind of the underlying kind of rule for that.
It's interesting because I suppose there's always that challenge of, you know, failure in an organization where the culture is not product led, and, you know, it's saying failure is a good thing, I imagine could be quite difficult, you know, for
yeah, I mean, to accept. The sole founder guy was like, I kind of like, he was a really lovely guy, but I kind of just wanted to just shake him a little bit and just go, look, this is what you're sitting on. This is the direction that you want to go in, but like, you're so kind of bloody minded on it. In the end, we just said, look, go and build the product that you think is going to be successful. And we wish you all the luck in the world. If you're on a rainy day, you want to look at all this data that tells you the direction to move forward in, it's all there for you. So, you know, you can't, what's the saying? You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. So,
and that, I think that's a good place to wrap up as well. Awesome. That was really, really helpful. That's always fun as always. Rob, we can actually grab a beer now because we're
we should do that anyway. And it's a pleasure to meet you guys as well. I think maybe next time we should do this. I think we should allow maybe a quick intro so I know a little bit about you guys, maybe just like who you are, where you work, and what you're trying to do. So yeah, maybe next time that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think it's been very useful. I've definitely picked up some good pointers, so appreciate that.
That's super helpful. I will post a link. Rob, do you want us to? Should I send people your way? LinkedIn, website?
Yeah, you can. I mean, as a friend and a kind of like of Henry's, and we've started doing our kind of like pre-podcast chats as well. So if you do have any questions, and kind of being a part of a company that was responsible for running like some of the best design sprints in the world, I feel like I know a few things. So if you have questions, feel free to contact me anytime on LinkedIn if you have a question.
Yeah, awesome. And I think as well, you know, I think use that, because I think getting, you know, even if it's just a quick tip on like how to run your first LDJ or even a sprint, then I'm sure Rob will be happy to help.
Yeah, and a quick plug as well. Follow me on Leap on Instagram as well. So the actual tag is @BeTheLeap. So and we're always putting like tips and tricks and things like that on. We're trying to build our content up. So yeah, follow us on that as well. And if you have questions off the back of that, then we'll always answer every question as well.
Right, perfect. All right, I'm going to post I'll post your LinkedIn, Be At Leap, and I will also post a replay of this on our Slack channel for everyone involved. Excellent. Let's give Rob a little clap.
No, round of applause to you guys as well. Thanks for all your questions.
Thanks, Rob.
No, great, really helpful. Cheers, Rob. I'll send you a WhatsApp anyway. We can catch.
Okay, cool. We'll catch in a bit. Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Yes, thanks.